Hi everybody, thanks for joining the Soberistas webinar tonight. We're so excited to have Dowsett Johnston presenting for us tonight, who is author of this fabulous book, Drink, The Intimate Relationship Between Women and Alcohol. Anne was the keynote speaker at a conference in Dublin in April of this year, where I first met her, and I'm so pleased that she's agreed to do this tonight because she was fantastic speaking there, and I'm sure she will be tonight. So I hope you enjoyed this webinar, and I'll hand you over to Anne now. Thanks, Anne.
Thank you, Lucy. It's just a thrill to be on Soberistas because I'm an enthusiastic member of the gang, and I usually begin with a very, very silly joke, which was, it goes this way. There once was a writer who headed up to the pearly gates on a very, very busy day, and she was waiting and waiting for her turn to figure out whether she was going to heaven or hell. And she was unsure, and finally got tired of waiting and went up to the front and asked to see God, and said to God, I don't have a lot of time, I'm not sure where I'm headed, but could I see a sneak peek of hell? And off she went. He said, first door on the right, and she opened the door and saw her worst nightmare, which is a room full of writers, all tip-tapping away, sweat coming off their brow, clock going round and round and round. Clearly they had all missed their deadlines. She went back to God and said, God, I didn't like that. Do you think I could take a sneak peek at heaven? And God said, lots of time, first door on the left. So off she went, and she opened the door, and she saw the same darn thing, which is clock going round and round, all chained to their desks, sweat pouring off their brow. Clearly they had missed their deadlines. And she said, I don't know, God, I don't see much difference between heaven and hell. And God said, oh, my dear, there's a huge difference. In heaven, the writers get published. And that was my heavenly truth, is 2 years ago. My book, Drink, which looks like this in North America, wine-stained cover, and this in the UK, which is a woman holding her head, called Drink, the Deadly Relationship Between Women and Alcohol in the UK, and the Intimate Relationship Between Women and Alcohol in the rest of the world. The Heavenly Truth was my book got published after 30 years in journalism. This was exciting. The hellish truth was I outed myself as an alcoholic. And not just an alcoholic, but as the poster girl for this day's modern alcoholic, which is female, which is high functioning, which is professional, and also well educated. And this was my truth 7 years ago when I decided to get sober, or let's make that 8, because it was 8 years. I struggled for the first year. I was very much a high-functioning professional woman. I was in my 50s. I was vice president of McGill University, which is arguably Canada's #1 university. And I had a big job, a big life, a full agenda, and I was deeply in trouble with alcohol. And it was exactly about this time of year in 2007 when I went to an addiction doctor and said, I'm heading into the holidays and it's not going to look pretty. What should I do? And the addiction doctor said to me, very wise older man, said, do you know yourself without alcohol? And I said, I do not. And he said, does anybody know you without alcohol? And I said, indeed, they don't. And he said, then let's try something out. Could you, in the next year, see what it is like to live without alcohol? I took myself off to rehab, and I was very successful at rehab. It's not hard to be successful at rehab. 30 days alone in a very tiny facility in the United States where I hoped no one would find me, no one would learn my story, and tried to turn my life around. And the problem was, the minute I got back to real life, The minute I got back to the pressures of my life, to my friends, to the same house, to my wine glasses, I began to slip. And I slipped for about the first 8 months. In sobriety, I couldn't stay sober. And it took me, I'm happy to say, as a member of Canada's National Recovery Group, I'm one of the directors called Faces and Voices of Recovery Canada. I'm proud to say that my name is Anne, and I am in long-term recovery. For me, that means I haven't felt the need, the compulsion to have a drink in more than 7 years. Which isn't to say that on a weekly basis, my brain doesn't tell me that perhaps I could pick up a drink. And never does it seem more persuasive than now in the holidays. Than now in the holidays, when we're all told that this is how we're going to relax and reward and celebrate what is a beautiful season. So I'm here to talk about what it means to get through the season, and in fact, do more than get through the season, to enjoy the season, sober and without relying on alcohol. I have to say that that first year was really tough for me because we live in an alcoholic society, and by that I mean walk into any social gathering and the first question you're going to be asked is red or white. Know your wines and you're sophisticated. Know your vodkas, you're probably young and hip. Know your alcopops, you're really young and hip and probably female. And what we've witnessed in the past, I'm going to say 20 years, is a heavy, heavy, heavy marketing to women, what I call in my book the pinking of the market. My book is part memoir, but it tells a story of many, many women and what has happened to us since the mid-1990s, especially when the alcohol industry began to really panicked in the mid-1990s, especially the spirits industry, and said, we're not beer, beer is cleaning our clock, beer is fun, beer is sports, beer is on television, beer looks like it's everything to everybody. All the Johnny Walker drinkers were dying out, and the spirits industry did market segmentation, looked around the world and realized that a whole gender was underperforming. And thus was born the alcopop, those what I call cocktails with training wheels, those sweet prepackaged drinks like over here Mike's Hard Lemonade and Smirnoff Ice, and targeted to young women, chick beer. And that experiment was hugely successful, so successful that company like Smirnoff, for instance, saw a huge uptick, 66% in its profits. And we now have a whole generation of young women and women who are my age who switched from straight from alcopops into tequila, into vodka, into, I would argue that we see wine as a food group. We see wine as something that we have with our meals and without our meals, and it's part of a sophisticated life. So we've been heavily marketed to. The pinking of the market is a huge reality and hugely successful, and in some countries, such as Ireland, female drinkers are outpacing male. We're outpacing male drinkers and drinking, let's take Ireland, twice what we did in the 1960s. So you know what it feels like. You race home from a busy job, you're standing at the cutting board, you're getting the evening meal ready, you're know that you're going to have to return to your work later in the day or in the evening, you're going to be overseeing homework, you're going to be tucking kids into bed, and so you open a bottle of wine and you can feel your shoulders come down from your earlobes, and it's a decompression tool. We all know what that feels like, and for years I did that, and I would have one glass of wine. And then when my life got tough and frankly I hit menopause and I hit a big depression, that one glass of wine turned into two, and that 2 glasses of wine turned into 3, and we know how that happens. We live in a culture where that is totally acceptable, and for me, my drinking really took off, and it took off badly for about 17 months. I was raised by a female alcoholic, my mom, who was part of the 60s when having cocktails and mixing it with Valium was very, very common as well. And so there's a story that we tell and should be telling about what happens to women when we're self-medicating, because self-medicating in my story was very much a part of it, self-medicating depression in my case, and anxiety and work stress. And my book takes a really hard look at the whys. So I've given you two of them. I've given you the self-medication part. I've given you the marketing part. And I guess I've given you the third, which is the decompression tool. And I would argue that alcohol has become the modern woman's steroid. And in my case, that was true. I used it to stay awake. I used it to go to sleep. I used it to make myself fun at a party fast. And I used it for everything. It allowed me to do the heavy lifting of a really complex world. And so many women of every age are facing really tough, complicated lives where we're in the middle or deep into a socioeconomic revolution on, yes, we go toe-to-toe with men in the workforce and we outpace men in post-secondary institutions, but we're supposed to be perfectly thin, perfect at home, perfect at work, perfect like our mothers were, especially perfect at Christmas. And the question is, how do we function consciously looking at this season and finding a way to get through? And the first thing I suggest is, as I do in sobriety, is extreme self-care. This is a time when to be present versus buying presents, to be present with yourself, to make time for whatever relaxes you, the yoga class, the time with friends, the time with your loved ones, the time resting, the time for all sorts of self-care is really, really important. And we know that when we're in sobriety. We know that that's the piece that often we haven't made time for. This is a very precious time of year, and it's time to be present for those who love you. I was going to lose my son had I continued drinking. And in fact, it was some very bad behavior at a Christmas party that caused him to say, "You will not know me if you continue." I went to a friend's very fancy Christmas party. It happened to be a birthday party for 3 of her children, and it was in the last week before Christmas. I was all dressed up in a very fancy black dress, and I drank too much, and I ended up hiding in the bathroom because I was so scared that somebody was going to find me and see how drunk I was. And indeed, they couldn't find me, and my best friend took me home from that party and sat down with my son and said, "What are you going to do?" And she took a bracelet off her arm, which says the Winston Churchill words, "Never, never, never give up." And she handed it to me, and I said I would go to rehab. And that is my sobriety bracelet. I never take it off. It's very precious to me. I don't know if you can see it. Never, never, never give up. If you're in new sobriety and this is your first Christmas, if this is your first season to weather, you will have no idea, I'm sure, like fingernails on a blackboard, how you're going to get through what I used to say was one half day at a time, not a day at a time, one afternoon, one morning. How you breathe through the nerves that you need to summon to go to a party where everyone else is drinking, where someone leans over to give you a hug and they've got a glass of red wine in their hand and you can smell the red wine and you want one badly. But you know, this is the one disease, and I do think it is a disease, where our brains tell us we do not have it. And this is a time for support groups. This is a time for Soberistas. This is a time for you to reach out to your Serenity sisters and brothers and to all who you feel understand the best you. And this is a time to put one foot in front of the other and to make new history. You know, 18 months into my sobriety, my fiance, the man I was to marry, dumped me. And my father died in the same period, and he died of extreme alcoholism. And he died right before Christmas. And I remember calling my son, who lived in the United States, was studying there, and I said, I've lost everything in sobriety. This is terrible. I might as well drink. And he said, go get a piece of paper, Mom. Draw a line down the middle. Now on one side, you can say, yes, you lost the man you loved. And he was a very, very lovely man until he wasn't, not to you, Mom. And on the other side, he said, write this, Mom. You got your friends back. Name them, Mom. You got your mother back. You got your sister back. You got your brother back. You got me back, Mom. You got me back, and you have been an unbelievable mom. And we are speaking again. And I said, we were always speaking. And he said, no, we weren't. Not really, Mom. Not when you were drinking. Don't you remember? I didn't even speak to you for 3 months. You're a wonderful mother. You've got your writing back. You've got your life back. Are you still writing, Mom? He said. And it was over the phone, and I said, yes, I'm still writing, but the tears were pouring down my face. And by this time, I was on the second side of the page. I had lost. I was fully down one side and over on the other. And that's what I want to say to you today, is that there is, 7 years later, no measuring the kind of life I have now. I wrote my book, obviously, in sobriety. I wrote about many, many other women who were sober, who had fought this demon, and I believe it is a demon. You know, always when I went around the world talking about my book, and I did a TED talk about my book and talked to reporters, they always asked me the same questions. Why did you write this book? And I saw it as they're asking me, are you crazy? Don't you realize you'll never get a job again? Why would you tell these stories on yourself? And how much did you drink? And the truth is, I'm not crazy. I do believe our secrets keep us sick. I do believe there's great health in the environment that we have in talking to one another, in outing our stories, in helping one another get one foot in front of the other to be sober. I did get a job again, although I'm back writing another book. And that book's on gratitude, which is what I feel in sobriety. How much did I drink? I drank a lot more than I should have, and probably less than some of you may think, but way too much for my health. Way, way too much for I blacked out night after night after night after night. And my fondest dream was to go into a Christmas, like this Christmas, when people could trust me, when people could want to, as they do this Christmas, want to travel with me. My son and I are traveling to ski together. And I want that circle of love around me. I am the most Anne I have ever been since I was a little girl. And alcohol stole all of that for me. So my advice to you is hang on to whatever handholds you have. Stick with your best friends. Do not go to the risky party. Do not go to the risky party or risk your sobriety and find yourself, as a young woman I know did last December 28th, deciding to drink again and dying when she choked on her own vomit. I lost a young woman in my circle because she just couldn't stand the season without alcohol. It isn't worth it. Sobriety is the greatest gift I have ever had. It is bracing. It is enlightening. It is full of love. And it gets better every year. And it's a matter of just finding in your soul, in your heart. I don't care if it takes reading children's books, which I sometimes do at Christmas. I read A. Milne's King John Was Not a Good Man. I read that on Christmas Eve to my son. Reread that on top of 'Twas the Night Before Christmas, because King John Is Not a Good Man is about a man who forgot that he needed people in his life. Sobriety, good sobriety, will give you people back, and lots of people, lots of love, lots of health, and most of all, a a chance to discover that celebrating, relaxing, and rewarding really has nothing to do with alcohol. We've been sold a really big bill of goods. We've been sold a notion that if we drink, we will have that handsome guy in our arms, we will be invited to that wonderful party, and that it will all look pretty. And all I say is play the tape forward, and you know there will be mascara under your eyes. You will not remember going to sleep. You will not read that great book on your pillow, and you will not have the hugs from your sons and daughters and loved ones that you expect. And it's a heartbreaker. My mother died a year ago this month, not sober, after so many years of drinking, but much more sober than my father. It robs us. It is something that steals from us, and it's really important that you reach out to others who know that to be true, who know that to be a lie, that alcohol will bring us all, and to appreciate that we do live in an alcoholic culture. It takes a lot of courage to stand up to it and to create a new world that all is possible. And with a convergence of voices, the kind of which you have at Soberistas, that you have in other communities, 12-step communities and other communities, so much is possible. So much is possible, larger than you can even imagine. So I wish everyone a stunning, stunning Christmas, holiday, season, full of love, full of hugs, full of community. Reach out and do the thing that you maybe haven't done. Listen to a great choir. Read a fantastic book. Make something for your family, and be present. Be present around the presents. That's my loving words of advice. Thank you for listening to me.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I'm starting to.
Oh. I've got a bit of an. I'll just. Right, I'll try again. Is that better? Hello?
I can hear you.
Oh, you can hear me? Right, okay. Thanks. Oh, that was brilliant. Thank you so much. That was really heartwarming. And yeah, just kind of really moving. Everything you said, I just completely resonated with me. And it is so important, I think, especially at Christmas, to just find other things to fill that. I think we often talk about this like void, this emotional void that opens up when you stop drinking. And I think especially at Christmas, it can be really a challenge to sort of fill that, because it's an easy solution to just fill it with wine, or to try and fill it with wine. But filling it with family and time around people that you love and doing nice things for yourself is a really good way to plug the gap, I think. So thank you for those wise words. We did, I think I forgot to say at the beginning that if you wanted to ask Anna a question, you can type it into the box at the side, and we've had a couple of questions already, but if anybody else wants to add a question now, just write it in and we'll go through as many as we can in the next 10-15 minutes. So the first question, Carol has said that she's been bought some very expensive champagne and is finding it really difficult to give it away. Have you got any advice?
Well, you know what I didn't say, and I will speak to the champagne because I was a champagne drinker. You know, I talked about it in terms of Ireland, but the truth is, you know, globally, men's drinking is slowing down and women's drinking is on the increase. And give that champagne away, and give it away because, first of all, you look very generous, and second of all, it really is the devil in disguise. I can remember saying to my addiction doctor, I love it. And he said, you should not love it. This is a considerable adversary. And in rehab, I used to think of it as there was a snake slithering up my shoulder, and it was my job to get the snake down. Or there was a bird on my other shoulder, and they used to be at war. You know, the bird was sobriety, and the snake was wanting to drink. You know, you know the old line. It's one drink is too many, and 1,000 isn't enough. And that expensive bottle of champagne is only one of a gazillion that can be purchased. You have to draw a line on the sand and say, today is the day I will give up. And only then can you start the really brave and interesting journey of finding out who you are without alcohol, as I did. Um, there's a question, what were the things that helped me do that, to stay sober in the early days? And as I said, I was really, I really had trouble, and I had to break up the day in pieces. I created, I'm going to say, a circle of people who knew I had to stay sober. And so I'll give you an example. My son at an expensive restaurant where the tables were really close together in Chicago, people next to us were ordering a really beautiful bottle of wine that I would have loved, and it got too much for me. And he leaned over at one point and he said, "Can I walk you around the block, Mom? Wouldn't it be better if you just took a break from this meal?" And indeed, it was one of the most powerful things he ever did for me. So I was open. I said, this is too much for me. I need to get out of here. Or I need a massage. I started seeing rewards as different things. Having a longer sleep, having a nap in the afternoon in the middle of a holiday, having I really took seriously HALT, never get too hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. I took that really seriously because those are the things I had medicated. So I hung on to people. I made Serenity Sisters, some of whom I still really count on. I prayed a lot. Do I still laugh as much on nights out with alcohol? I laugh way more. I laugh way more. My brother told me that I used to look like a really smart woman turning into the Three Stooges, which he said was somewhat delightful, but I looked really stupid. And I think I did really look stupid. And so I laugh all the time. I am now traveling the world, talking to other writers, making new friends. And for Michelle, my boyfriend dumped me after, my fiance dumped me after a year and a half, and the reason was I was depressed and anxious in the first year and a half. I'm not going to gloss over it. It was really tough. And yet, you will never find out, ever be able to put this in your rear view mirror while you still put a depressant down your gullet. You know, I was talking to some addiction doctors just a week ago. I'm on a big recovery committee in Canada, and they were saying the first 18 months or 24 months, people can look bipolar, they can look depressed, they can look anxious because you can be wobbly. And it's a time to reach out and use everything you can to get your supports. I mean everything. I mean, your loved ones, you need to say, I'm having trouble. And how did I explain to my friends that I was not drinking? I said, you know, there's a line everybody seems to ask me, do you mind if I drink? And sometimes I say yes. I'm having a bad day. It would be really great if you didn't. But most of all, I say, do you mind if I don't drink? It's not my line. I stole it from somebody else, a friend. And I say, do you mind if I don't drink? And I always have a drink in my hand. And I, yes, have gained a little bit of weight. I drink cranberry and soda. I mix it up. I drink pretty drinks that people will bring me, mocktails. I always have my drink in a beautiful wine glass, and I put lime and lemon and anything pretty that I can think of. I buy more clothes than I used to. I reward myself. I bought myself a ring when I turned 7 years sober on November the 3rd. I tell my friends it wasn't good for me, and most of my friends know that I had devolved into someone that they didn't like as much. My cousin was killed by a drunk driver on Father's Day when I was the last year I drank, and I drank too much at his wake. Can you imagine what that did? I blacked out. I drank so much I blacked out at a wake where an entire family was crying about a drunk driver killing our loved one. And after I did that, I knew I had no hope. They say that alcohol incarcerates and it kills. And I think we don't talk enough about that. We don't look at it as a drug, and we forget that it incarcerates and it kills. And I knew ultimately I was going to fall down the stairs. I was going to say something that could never be taken back. I did lose my job. I didn't crack up a car like my mom, and I wasn't put in jail, but I knew I was headed in the wrong direction. And I think we hit a lot of bottoms. And if you can't find your bottom where you are today, life will find you a new one, and it will be a lot less pretty than the one that you've already seen. And who wants to see that? No one, not your loved ones. So that's how I explained to my friends that I had stopped. Some of them, because I was a secret drinker, didn't believe me. They said, you can't possibly be an alcoholic. I've never seen you overdrink. I hid it really, really well. I lived in another city as a vice principal of a university. There were those who did, but some didn't. And so yes, I laugh. Yes, I would go to any end to get through the first year or year and a half, because it's not for the faint of heart. You can give yourself lots of courage marks for toughing it out in sobriety. You deserve them. You deserve all sorts of marks. You deserve a present. You deserve a prize. You deserve a pat on the back. Each and every day that you get up and say a prayer for yourself, even if it's as simple as please in the morning and thank you at night. If that's all you can manage, you know, I've added on meditation and exercise and retreats and all sorts of things. I say be a self-seeker. Be a seeker of all kinds. Find any faith that you can believe in. Hang on tight to the rails. Because if you do, I cannot exaggerate what a great world is available to us. And it is the one thing that is really going sideways for a lot of bright women. Going sideways in a way that we're compromising our own success and compromising our families and compromising who we could be, what we could be, no matter how ambitious we are. So I just encourage all of you to take it as a precious, precious gift and savor it and cherish it and look after it, because it's hard won.
I think all questions. Thanks for that, Anne. That was brilliant. I'm really I feel really touched, and I'm just so pleased that you said that you would do this for Soberistas tonight, because it's been a huge help to me personally, but I think to everybody watching as well. It was really inspiring. So thank you.
Thank you, Lucy.
And thanks to everybody who's been watching. And I hope you enjoyed it. I'm sure you did. Thank you, Anne, again. And don't forget to, if you haven't read Anne's book, I would just like to reiterate what a great read it is. I have the American cover here, but it's available in England with a different cover. But,
there it is. Drink.
It's well worth a read, and maybe stick that on your Christmas list as another thing to get you through this crazy alcoholic season that we're about to get into. All right, well, thanks again, Anne, and we'll see you in January for our next webinar. Night-night.
Night-night. Bye, Lucy.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.